On the rooftop of a glass skyscraper in downtown Chicago, a helicopter sat waiting, keys in the ignition, fuel tank full. CEO Kenji Tanaka paced in his impeccably tailored charcoal suit, phone pressed to his ear, his voice a low, urgent murmur of Japanese and English. He needed to fly now. A multi-billion-dollar acquisition depended on it. 2 assistants hovered beside him, frantically calling every backup pilot in the city. All unavailable. Then a woman in a simple grey maid's uniform stepped forward, dust rag still in hand. "I can fly it," she said quietly. The assistants, a young man named David and a senior aide, Ms. Albright, exchanged a look before Ms. Albright let out a short, condescending laugh. Kenji turned, looking the woman up and down, then a cold smirk touched his lips. "Fly this helicopter, and I'll marry you." None of them knew they had just mocked one of the finest search and rescue pilots the Coast Guard had ever trained. Kenji Tanaka was 34 years old and already a titan, helming Tanaka Dynamics, a global technology firm his father had built from a small electronics company in Tokyo. He'd inherited his father's corner office, his board of directors, and his reputation for ruthless efficiency. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his suits were bespoke, and his shoes clicked on the polished floors with an air of absolute authority. Everyone at the company feared him, and he cultivated that fear like a prized orchid. He had a mantra, one he repeated before every negotiation: sentiment is a liability. It applied to business. It applied to life. Years ago, he'd been engaged to a woman named Isabella. She'd been beautiful, sophisticated, and supportive, until the day his father retired and the full weight of the Tanaka legacy fell upon his shoulders. Then she left, admitting she couldn't handle the pressure of being Mrs. Tanaka, of living under the constant scrutiny of a corporate dynasty. The betrayal had forged his emotional armor. He stopped trusting warmth. He stopped believing in partnerships that weren't contractual. Now, he believed only in data, market share, and control. His company was on the brink of acquiring Apex Industries, a robotics conglomerate that would solidify Tanaka Dynamics as the undisputed leader in their field. The deal was worth billions. But Apex's board was old-fashioned. They demanded face-to-face meetings, firm handshakes, and a final signing in person. Kenji had scheduled the meeting at their headquarters across the city. The helicopter was his strategic solution to Chicago's infamous gridlock. Everything had been meticulously planned until his pilot called from the emergency room with a shattered collarbone. Amelia Reed was 32, though most people at Tanaka Dynamics barely registered her existence. She worked the early morning shift, polishing glass, dusting empty boardrooms, and cleaning the executive suites before the sun came up. She wore the same simple uniform every day, kept her head down, and never engaged in small talk. She was tall and slender, with auburn hair often tied back in a simple ponytail and eyes that held a quiet, weary depth. People saw her and assumed she was just another woman trying to make ends meet. What they didn't know was that Amelia had once worn a different uniform. She had been Captain Amelia Reed of the United States Coast Guard, a helicopter pilot with a chest full of commendations. She'd flown Jayhawks into the fury of hurricanes, rescued stranded sailors from raging seas, and earned a reputation for being one of the calmest pilots under the most extreme pressure. But that life had ended 3 years ago when her husband, Mark, died in a rock-climbing accident in the Cascades. He had been an adventurer, always chasing the next peak. Amelia had been on a rescue mission off the coast of Alaska when it happened. She came home to an empty apartment and a 6-month-old daughter, Lily, who would now grow up without a father. Amelia left the Coast Guard after that. She couldn't fly anymore. Every time she sat in a cockpit, she saw Mark's smiling face and felt the crushing weight of risk. She heard his last voicemail, left from a trailhead, telling her he loved her and would see her and their baby girl soon. So she walked away. She took the first job she could find that paid the bills, didn't ask about her past, and allowed her the flexibility to care for Lily. Tanaka Dynamics hired her for their cleaning staff. Nobody cared. Nobody looked twice. It was exactly the anonymity she craved. Lily was 5 now, a bright spark with her father's adventurous spirit and Amelia's thoughtful eyes. She didn't talk much, but she loved helicopters. She carried a little sketchbook everywhere, filled with crayon drawings of Coast Guard Jayhawks, news choppers, and fantastical flying machines. Sometimes, Amelia brought her to the office in the early hours before the daycare opened. Lily would sit quietly in a corner, drawing, while Amelia worked. One morning, the senior assistant, Miss Albright, had snapped at Lily for gently touching a detailed scale model of a vintage seaplane in the lobby. Amelia had apologized quietly, taken Lily's hand, and left without a word. Kenji had been there. He'd watched the entire exchange from the elevator bank. For a fleeting moment, he'd almost said something, but the impulse vanished. He just stepped into the elevator and went up to his office. There was one other thing people didn't know about Amelia. A few weeks ago, she'd been cleaning the engineering wing late at night when she noticed one of the advanced flight simulators was glitching. The collective control mechanism was jammed. Without thinking, she'd set down her cleaning cart, opened the maintenance panel, and recalibrated the sensors in under 10 minutes. She didn't report it. She just finished her work and moved on. But Kenji had seen her through the glass wall of his office overlooking the wing. He'd paused, watching her hands move with a focused precision that didn't come from a manual. Then he dismissed it as a strange fluke and returned to his work. The day of the Apex signing arrived with the tension of a drawn bowstring. Kenji had been at his desk since 4 a.m., reviewing contracts, rehearsing his closing arguments, and triple-checking every detail. The helicopter was scheduled to leave at 9 a.m. The meeting was at 10:30. There was no margin for error. At 8:45, his phone rang. It was his pilot, breathless from a hospital bed. A multi-car pile-up on the expressway. His collarbone was fractured. He couldn't fly. Kenji's stomach tightened into a knot of ice. He immediately buzzed his assistant, David, a perpetually nervous young man who handled logistics. "Find me another pilot. Now." David made 20 calls in 10 minutes. Every charter service in Chicago was booked solid or couldn't get a pilot to their helipad in time. The backup they kept on retainer was stuck in traffic on the other side of the city. Their third option was on vacation in Hawaii. Kenji stood on the rooftop, staring at the helicopter. It was right there, a multi-million-dollar machine, fueled, ready, and utterly useless. Miss Albright stood beside him, phone pressed to her ear, shaking her head. "We're out of options, sir. We'll have to drive." Kenji clenched his jaw. "We'll never make it." David looked pale. "Perhaps we can reschedule." Kenji shot him a look that could freeze fire. "Apex doesn't reschedule. If we are not in that room at 10:30, the deal is dead." The rooftop fell into a tense silence, broken only by the distant hum of the city. That's when Amelia stepped out of the stairwell. She'd been cleaning the rooftop lounge when she overheard the frantic calls. She walked toward them slowly, holding a fresh dust rag. Kenji barely glanced at her. Then Amelia stopped a few feet away and spoke, her voice calm and clear. "I can fly it." The words hung in the crisp morning air. Then Miss Albright laughed, a loud, derisive sound meant to belittle and dismiss. David joined in with a nervous titter. "Are you serious?" Miss Albright said, shaking her head. "You think this is like a movie?" Amelia didn't flinch. She just stood there, hands at her sides, waiting. Kenji turned to look at her fully for the first time. He took in the simple uniform, the quiet posture, the complete absence of arrogance. He didn't believe her, not for a second. But he was out of time, and out of options. And something about the way she'd said it, so plainly, so without hesitation, made him pause. He stepped closer, folding his arms, and met her eyes. "You're telling me you can fly a Sikorsky S-76? Amelia nodded once. "Yes, sir." Miss Albright scoffed. "This is absurd." Kenji studied Amelia's face. There was no fear there, no doubt. Just a profound, unsettling calm. It reminded him of something, a stillness he'd only seen in the most seasoned executives and military leaders. He made a decision, a reckless, desperate one. He smiled, a cold, sharp-edged thing, and said the words that would change everything. "Fly this helicopter, and I'll marry you." Miss Albright's jaw dropped. David looked as if he was about to faint. Amelia's expression didn't change. She just nodded again, set her dust rag on a nearby bench, and walked toward the helicopter. Kenji watched her go, half expecting her to turn back and admit it was all a foolish bluff. She didn't. She climbed into the pilot's seat, fastened the harness, and placed her hands on the cyclic and collective controls like she was born to hold them. The helicopter's twin engines whined to life. The rotor blades began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, cutting through the morning air with a deep, powerful thrum. Kenji stood frozen on the rooftop, his tailored suit jacket flapping in the rotor wash. Miss Albright grabbed his arm. "Sir, you can't actually get in that thing." Kenji pulled his arm away. "We don't have a choice." He climbed into the passenger seat, buckled his harness, and put on the headset. Amelia's voice came through, clear and professional. "Ready?" Kenji's heart hammered against his ribs. He nodded. "Let's go." The helicopter lifted off the pad with a smoothness that defied belief, rising above the skyscraper with a precision that could only come from thousands of hours of practice. Kenji gripped the edge of his seat, his breath catching in his throat. Below them, Miss Albright and David stood on the rooftop, staring up in stunned silence. Amelia flew like a surgeon with a scalpel. No wasted motion, no hesitation. She adjusted their altitude with a touch so light the aircraft barely seemed to move. She banked gracefully over the Chicago River, weaving through designated air corridors with the innate confidence of someone who had navigated far more treacherous skies. Kenji couldn't take his eyes off her. Her hands moved over the complex array of controls with a quiet, fluid grace. Her eye scanned the instruments, the horizon, the airspace around them, processing everything at once. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a hobbyist's confidence. This was mastery. He tried to speak, but his voice was stuck. Finally, he managed, "Where did you learn to fly?" Amelia didn't look at him. "It was my job once." Her tone was flat, offering nothing more. Kenji's mind reeled. Who was this woman? The flight took 12 minutes. Amelia set the helicopter down on the Apex Industries helipad with a touch so gentle it felt like they were landing on a cloud. The kind of landing that wouldn't have disturbed a full glass of water. She powered down the engines, removed her headset, and stepped out without a word. Kenji sat in his seat for a long moment, gripping the armrests, staring straight ahead. His entire body was trembling, not from fear, but from the profound shock of the experience. He unbuckled slowly, climbed out, and walked toward the building entrance where the Apex executives were already waiting. Amelia stood by the helicopter, her arms crossed, watching him go. He turned back, met her steady gaze, and asked the question he couldn't hold in any longer. "Who are you?" Amelia's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Just someone who used to fly," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked back toward the helicopter. Kenji stood there, frozen, as the automatic doors of the Apex headquarters slid open behind him. He forced himself to move, to walk inside, to put on his CEO mask and shake hands and smile and talk about synergy and valuations. But his mind was somewhere else entirely. It was on a rooftop with a woman in a maid's uniform who had just flown him across the city without breaking a sweat. The meeting was a triumph. He signed the contracts. The Apex CEO congratulated him on his decisive leadership. But when he stepped back outside an hour later, the helicopter was gone, and so was Amelia. That evening, Kenji sat alone in his vast corner office, staring at his computer screen. He pulled up the company's employee database and typed in her name. Amelia Reed. Hired 2 years ago. Position, custodial staff. No prior employment listed, no references, no background check beyond a basic criminal scan, which was clean. It was the file of a ghost, of someone who wanted to remain unseen. Kenji leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his mahogany desk. Then he made a call, not to HR, but to an old contact at the Pentagon. He didn't know why. It was an instinct, a gut feeling born from the way Amelia had moved in that cockpit, like a professional, like someone trained for crisis. His contact called back 2 hours later. "You sitting down, Kenji?" he asked. Kenji's pulse quickened. "Just tell me." His contact's voice was low, laced with respect. "Captain Amelia Reed. United States Coast Guard, helicopter pilot. 2 tours, highly decorated. Honorable discharge 3 years ago." Kenji's hand tightened around the phone. "Why did she leave?" There was a pause. "Her husband died. A climbing accident. She had a baby daughter. She just walked away from it all." Kenji closed his eyes. The expansive office suddenly felt small and suffocating. "Anything else?" His contact hesitated. "Yeah. She's got a distinguished flying cross. Pulled a fishing crew of 6 off a sinking trawler during a Category 4 hurricane. The report says it was a textbook suicide mission. The woman's a legitimate hero, Kenji." He hung up without saying goodbye. For a long time, he just sat there, staring at the glittering Chicago skyline. A hero. A mother. A woman who had lost everything and chosen to disappear into the shadows. And he had mocked her. He had laughed at her. He had made a cruel, flippant joke about marriage while she stood there, silent and composed, asking for nothing. Over the next few days, Kenji began to notice things he'd never seen before. He saw Amelia in the hallways, moving quietly with her cart. He saw her in the employee lounge late at night, warming up a small container of food while Lily slept on a nearby bench, clutching her sketchbook. He saw the gentle way Amelia adjusted Lily's blanket without waking her, the way she checked her daughter's forehead with the back of her hand. One night, he saw Amelia carry a sleeping Lily down to the small on-site medical office because the girl had a cough. She didn't ask for help. She didn't complain. She just handled it, the way she seemed to handle everything, alone, quietly, without expecting a thing from anyone. Kenji started watching her, analyzing her movements, her quiet efficiency. He noticed she never ate in the main cafeteria. She always brought her own food and ate in a deserted stairwell. She always arrived exactly on time and left the moment her shift ended. She avoided eye contact with executives, kept her head down, and spoke only when spoken to. She was invisible by design. And the more he watched, the more he realized something that made his chest ache. Amelia wasn't hiding because she was ashamed. She was hiding because she was protecting something, her daughter, her peace, the fragile, quiet life she had painstakingly built from the wreckage of her old one. One evening, Kenji stayed late, deliberately. He knew Amelia's shift ended at 11 p.m. He waited in the lobby, pretending to read reports on his tablet. At 10:50, Amelia walked through, carrying a tired Lily in her arms, the girl's head resting on her mother's shoulder. Kenji stood up. "Amelia." She stopped, turning slowly. Her expression was guarded. "Mr. Tanaka." He hesitated, suddenly feeling unsure of himself. "I never properly thanked you for the flight." Amelia shifted Lily in her arms. "It was nothing." Kenji took a breath. "I know who you are." "What you were." Amelia's jaw tightened. For the first time, he saw a flicker of something in her eyes, in not anger, but a deep, weary resignation. "Then you know I'm not that person anymore." "Maybe," Kenji said softly. "But you're still someone." Lily stirred, mumbling something about helicopters. Amelia gently smoothed her hair. Kenji knelt down to Lily's level. "Hi, Lily. I hear you like helicopters." The little girl's eyes fluttered open. She blinked at him, then looked at her mom. Amelia gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Lily looked back at Kenji and her face brightened slightly. She pointed to the sketchbook peeking out of Amelia's bag. Amelia sighed softly and handed it to her. Lily flipped it open to a surprisingly detailed drawing of a Coast Guard helicopter hovering over a stormy sea. "This is my mommy," Lily said, pointing to the stick figure in the cockpit. She's the best pilot in the world. Kenji's throat tightened. He glanced up at Amelia, who was looking away, her jaw set like stone. I believe you, he said softly to the little girl. That night, Kenji couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Lily's drawing, about the haunted look in Amelia's eyes when her daughter called her the best pilot in the world. He thought about his own life, the billion-dollar deals, the sterile, empty penthouse he went home to, the emails he answered at 2 a.m. because there was nothing else. He had built an empire, but he was its sole, lonely inhabitant. And for the first time in years, he wondered if that was a victory at all. The next morning, he made a decision. He called Amelia into his office. She arrived 10 minutes later, still in her uniform, looking wary. Am I in trouble, sir? Kenji shook his head. No. I want to offer you something. He explained that Apex Industries had reached out after hearing about the flight. They wanted to hire a consultant to help redesign their pilot training simulators, someone with real-world, high-stakes experience. They had asked if Tanaka Dynamics had anyone who fit the bill. It's a 6-month contract, he said. Excellent pay, flexible hours. You be working from home mostly, consulting with their engineers. Amelia stared at him. Why are you doing this? Kenji met her gaze. Because your talent is wasted polishing floors. She was quiet for a long time. Then she shook her head. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Tanaka. But no. Kenji blinked, stunned. Why not? Amelia's voice was firm but not unkind. Because I don't need a title. I don't need to be noticed. I just need Lily to be safe and happy. That's all that matters. Kenji didn't push. He just nodded. But as Amelia turned to leave, he said one more thing. You know, you don't have to disappear to protect her. You can be both, a mother and a hero. Amelia paused at the door, her back to him. She didn't respond, but he saw the way her shoulders tensed before she walked out. He knew he had struck a nerve. Late one night, Kenji found himself wandering the empty floors of the building. He ended up in the engineering wing, near the old simulation bay. Then he heard it, a soft, broken sound. Crying. He followed it and found Lily, sitting on the floor outside the simulation room, knees pulled to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Kenji's heart clenched. He knelt beside her. Lily, what's wrong? Where's your mom? Lily hiccuped. She's in there. She said she just needed a minute. Kenji looked through the thick glass window. Amelia was sitting in one of the dormant flight rigs, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He turned back to Lily. Did something happen? The little girl nodded, her voice small. She had another bad dream about my daddy. Kenji closed his eyes. He sat down on the floor beside Lily, unsure of what to do. After a moment, Lily leaned against him. I miss him too, she whispered. Kenji wrapped an arm around her small shoulders. I know, sweetheart. I know. They sat like that until the door to the simulation room opened and Amelia stepped out. Her eyes were red, but her face was composed. She saw Kenji with Lily and froze. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't realize anyone was here. Kenji stood, gently guiding Lily toward her mother. It's okay. Amelia scooped Lily into her arms, holding her close. The girl buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Amelia looked at Kenji, and for the first time, he saw past the calm exterior to the raw vulnerability beneath. I used to be in control of everything, she said quietly, her voice rough with emotion. I used to know exactly what to do in any situation. Now. She trailed off. Kenji's voice was soft. You're doing fine, Amelia. She shook her head. I'm barely holding it together. He stepped closer. You flew across a city to save my company. You're raising a wonderful child on your own. You're holding it together better than most people ever could. Amelia's voice cracked. I lost control once. During a rescue. My co-pilot got injured. I had to choose between getting him to safety or saving the last person in the water. I chose the mission. He lived, but he never flew again. I got a medal. He got a desk job. I've been second-guessing my own judgment ever since she looked away. I left because I couldn't trust myself anymore. Then Mark died, and I couldn't even protect him. So I disappeared. Because if I'm nobody, I can't fail anyone else. Kenji's carefully constructed walls crumbled. He reached out and gently touched her arm. You're not nobody. And you haven't failed anyone. Amelia finally met his eyes, and in that shared glance, a profound understanding passed between them. Kenji spoke again, his own voice trembling slightly. I was engaged once. The day I became CEO, she left me. Said she couldn't handle the pressure. So I decided I would never be vulnerable again. I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me. He paused. But I think I've been failing, too. Just in a different way. They stood there in the dim hallway, two broken people who had tried to solve their pain with isolation. Lily had fallen asleep in Amelia's arms. Kenji looked at the sleeping child, then back at Amelia. You said you used to fly for your country. What if you started flying for yourself again? For her? Amelia's voice was barely a whisper. I don't know if I remember how. Kenji offered a small, tentative smile. Then maybe I can help you. The next day, Kenji's father arrived at the office unannounced. Mr. Tanaka Sr. was 75, with a shock of silver hair and the unyielding posture of a man who had built an empire with his bare hands. He walked into Kenji's office without knocking. We need to talk. Kenji looked up. About what? His father's voice was like ice. About the cleaning woman. Kenji's stomach dropped. How did you? Mr. Tanaka slammed a folder on the desk. You think I don't have ears in this company? You let some nobody fly our helicopter. You're offering her contracts. People are talking, Kenji. Kenji stood, his voice sharp. That nobody is a decorated war hero. She saved the Apex deal. His father's face darkened. I do not care if she single-handedly won a war. She is a maid. She has a child. She has baggage. She is not suitable for the Tanaka family. Kenji's hands clenched into fists. You don't get to decide that. His father leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. I built this company. I built this legacy. And I will not watch you tarnish it for some broken woman who cleans toilets. Kenji's voice shook with a rage he hadn't felt in years. She is not broken. She's the strongest person I have ever met. Mr. Tanaka stared at him. You are making a grave mistake. Kenji met his father's glare without flinching. Then it's my mistake to make. And if you cannot accept her, then I will resign. The room fell silent. His father's expression shifted from anger to disbelief. You would not. Kenji's voice was steady. Try me. Mr. Tanaka stood there for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word. Kenji sank into his chair, his hands trembling. He had just threatened to walk away from everything. And he had meant every word. Meanwhile, Apex Industries sent another offer, this time directly to Amelia. They wanted her to perform a live flight demonstration at their annual Global Tech Summit, a showcase of precision flying for investors and partners. In exchange, they would fund a full scholarship for Lily at any private school in the country, through to university. Amelia read the email 3 times, her heart pounding. She knew Kenji must have been involved. She wanted to say no, to retreat back into the shadows. But then she thought of Lily, of the opportunities her daughter deserved, of a future she could never provide on her current salary. She showed the email to Kenji. He read it carefully, then looked at her. What do you want to do? Her voice was uncertain. I don't know if I can. Kenji leaned forward. This isn't about them, Amelia. It's about you. About Lily. About stepping back into the light. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What if I fail?" Kenji's voice was gentle but firm. "You flew me across this city without flinching. You won't fail." He paused. "Will you be there?" Kenji nodded. "Every second." Amelia took a deep, shuddering breath. "Okay. I'll do it." The day of the demonstration arrived. The event was held at a private airfield outside Chicago. Hundreds of people filled the hangars and viewing stands. Chloe stood near the flight line, wearing a headset, acting as Amelia's ground liaison. Amelia stood by the helicopter, dressed in a borrowed flight suit that fit her perfectly. She looked not like a maid, but like the captain she was. Lily was beside her, holding her hand, wearing a tiny pair of aviator sunglasses. The little girl was beaming. "You're going to be awesome, Mommy." Amelia knelt down, adjusting Lily's sunglasses. "You think so, Peanut?" Lily nodded fiercely. "You're the best pilot in the world. Remember." Amelia's throat tightened. She kissed her daughter's forehead, then stood and walked toward the helicopter. Kenji's voice came through her headset. "Ready." Amelia climbed into the cockpit. "Ready." The engines roared. The crowd went silent. She lifted off smoothly, rising into the clear blue sky. She performed a series of breathtaking maneuvers, hovering turns, rapid ascents, flawless altitude holds. It was a ballet in the air, a display of perfect control. The crowd watched, mesmerized. Lily stood on the sidelines, jumping up and down. "That's my mommy. That's my mommy." Kenji felt tears welling in his eyes. He didn't bother wiping them away. When Amelia landed, the entire crowd erupted in a standing ovation. She stepped out of the helicopter and Lily ran to her, leaping into her arms. Amelia held her daughter tight, and for the first time in 3 years, she smiled. A real, radiant smile that lit up her entire face. Later that evening, Kenji returned to his penthouse to find an envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a handwritten note from his father, in elegant Japanese script. It said, "You were right. Any woman who fights that hard for her child is worthy of more respect than I showed. I am sorry. I am proud of you." Kenji sat on his sofa, holding the note, his own tears falling for the second time that day. Amelia used the scholarship to enroll Lily in a wonderful school. But she didn't stop there. With Kenji's encouragement, she started a non-profit that used flight simulation to help mentor at-risk youth. Kenji quietly provided the initial seed funding to get it off the ground. He never told her it was him, but she knew. One afternoon, Lily brought home a school assignment. The prompt was "Write about your hero." Her essay, written in big, wobbly letters, started, "My hero is my mommy, but my other hero is Mr. Kenji. He helped my mommy remember she's a pilot, and he makes her smile." Amelia read it at their small kitchen table, her heart full. That weekend, Kenji went to the rooftop. He didn't know why, maybe for nostalgia, maybe for hope. When he arrived, he found Amelia there, wiping down the helicopter's windshield. He smiled. "Old habits." Amelia looked up, grinning. "Something like that." He walked over. "You know, I never actually meant what I said that day. About marrying you." Amelia set down her rag. "I know." Kenji's voice softened. "But what if I meant it now?" Amelia froze. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw everything he wasn't saying. The hope, the fear, the love. He stepped closer. "Are you sure?" She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "I've never been more sure of anything." The sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. On the rooftop of the Tanaka Dynamics Tower, beside the helicopter that had started it all, Kenji Tanaka knelt on one knee. In his hand was a simple platinum ring engraved with 2 small, elegant wings. "I used to live for my company," he said, his voice steady. "But now I want to live for 2 people, you and Lily. If you'll have me. Her vision blurred. Yes. Kenji slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms. Lily, who had been hiding behind a ventilation unit with a bouquet of wildflowers, ran out, shouting, "Does this mean he's staying forever?" Amelia laughed through her tears. "Forever?" Lily cheered. "Mommy, you did it!" They boarded the helicopter together, all three of them. Amelia in the pilot's seat, Kenji beside her, and Lily in the back, clutching her sketchbook. The engines hummed to life. The rotors spun. And as the helicopter lifted off into the golden Chicago sky, Kenji looked at Amelia and thought about how far they had come, from a cruel joke on a rooftop to a family taking flight together. Amelia glanced over at him and smiled. "Where to, boss?" Kenji smiled back, taking her hand. "Anywhere. As long as we're together." Below them, the city sprawled out like a promise. Above them, the sky stretched infinite and free. And for the first time in both their lives, they weren't running from the past. They were flying toward the future.